Hello YouTube, this is Pastor Green. We're doing another creation science seminar. Today is going to be 4B, more lies in the textbooks. You can email me at godsohman@gmail.com. This is going to be a creation seminar on YouTube, so make sure you subscribe to my channel, click the bell. Also like and subscribe by clicking the subscribe button and the notification bell. It'll let you know whenever I post a new video. Also by liking and commenting, lets YouTube know that I'm getting seen, and it's actually going to promote my video and I'll get seen more. Creationists love love reading the Bible, and we love science. And we try to sit there and fit the Bible and science together. We look at the world around us and we actually see what's going on. There's many different science books out there. There's biology books and earth science books, and there's going to be geology books, and we really love the Bible, and we also love science. So we try to sit there and see, is the Bible true? Does it fit with the scientific theories? And science is amazing. I mean, there's so many different things in science that proves the Bible. But for some reason, the evolutionary theory is like crept in there for some reason. And it doesn't make any sense because it has nothing to do with science. This is actually a chart that was made back in 2002, and it shows you each state, and it shows you how how good they're teaching evolution. Places in Ohio where I live at, Georgia, Florida, Mississippi, Alaska, places like that are doing a very, very horrible job at teaching evolution. But of course, places like California, South Carolina, North Carolina, Indiana, they're doing a very, very good job. And places like Texas and Washington, they're doing an okay job. So good job Ohio and Alaska and Florida and everything like that for not teaching evolution, because it makes absolutely no sense. Paul Lemonine said, "It results from this explanation that the theory of evolution is not exact. Evolution is a kind of dogma which is its own priests no longer believe, but they uphold it for the people. It is necessary to have the courage to state this, if only that the men of the future generation may orient their research into a different direction." So basically what this guy's saying is he's saying that the people that actually believe evolution really don't believe it, but they teach it because they hope that one day in the future we're going to have evidence for it. Science will go about teaching that evolution is a fact of life or great comment, and the stories they are telling may be the greatest hoax ever. And explaining evolution, we don't have one iota of fact. That was a psychologist of the Atomic Energy Commission. But when you go to school, you have all these teachers that are teaching evolution as a fact, even though there's actually no evidence actually pointing to it being a fact. And sometimes when you go to classrooms, these teachers will basically say, you have to believe this or else you're going to fail my class. So in seminar part 4A, we discovered some lies that they use for evidence for evolution. For instance, the Grand Canyon was formed solely by the Colorado River. That was a lie. The geologic column shows Earth's history. That was a lie. Rocks date the fossils and the fossils date the rocks. That was proved to be a lie. Index fossils, plants and animals related. Changes in species is a real meaning of evolution. We all proved those were lies. Natural selection causes evolution. Pepper moth, comparative anatomy, those are all lies. Human embryos have gill slips. That was proven a lie 250 years ago. The fetus is not human. The appendix is vestigial. The snake has vestigial legs. The whale has a pelvis. The human tailbone is vestigial. We all showed all those are lies in the last seminar, part 4A. So let's cover a few more lies in the textbooks, what you can do about it, and why the theory is dangerous. The Bible says in the beginning God created the heaven and the earth. The Bible says in Exodus 20:11, "For in 6 days the Lord made heaven, the earth, the sea, and all that in them is." That covers everything. But the textbooks will say that 18 to 20 billion years ago, all the matter in the universe was considered into one very dense, very hot region that may have been much smaller than appeared on the page. And then the Big Bang happened. See, this is all matter in the universe. That would mean all the heat and all the atoms, everything. Then they also say that the planet Earth formed about 4.6 billion years ago. It would be more than a half billion years before the planet cooled to a rocky surface. And as you have read, hundreds of millions of years would be passed before the oceans formed. So the planet Earth cooled and a rocky surface was created. Proverbs 19:27 says, "Cease, my son, to hear the instruction that causes to err from the words of knowledge." Revelations 4:10 and 11 says, "The 24 elders fell down before him that sat on the throne, and worshipped him that liveth forever and ever, saying, Thou art worthy, O Lord, to receive glory and honor and power, for thou hast created all things, and for thy pleasure they were created." So the Bible's saying that God created everything, and evolutionists are saying that it just happened by itself. Acts 7:49 says, "Heaven is my throne, and earth my footstool. Which house will ye build for me, saith the Lord? Or what place of my rest? Have not my hands made all these things?" So God's saying that He created everything. Psalms 94:8-9 says, "He that planted the ear, shall he not hear? He that formed my eyes, shall he not see?" Charles Darwin said, "To suppose that the eye could have been formed by natural selection seems, I freely confess, absurd in the highest degree." So even Charles Darwin, the author of The Origin of Species, basically says that there's no way that the eye evolved. You know, your retina of your eye is less than 1 square inch, yet it contains over 137 million light-sensitive cells. How would you like to be the electrician to actually put 137 million light-sensitive cells in a 1/4 square inch? In a debate with atheist Ed Beckner in Buffalo, he told Dr. Hovind the human eye is poorly designed. He said it was wired backwards with blood vessels in the front of the retina. He said the octopus eye had a much better eye because the blood vessels were behind the retina. And if you look at this biology book, it shows on the top a human eye. And it shows that you have a blind spot because the light is blocked by nerve fibers. And on the bottom, it shows you an octopus eye, and the light sensors are actually, the nerve sensors are on the front. So that way, you don't have that blind spot. I'm sorry, the light sensors are on the front, and the octopus eye, the light sensors are in the back. But the difference is that humans live above the water, and octopuses live under the water. And water blocks UV light. So it's okay to have the nerve sensors in the back of the eye, so that way the photoreceptors won't get burnt. But since humans are above the ground, UV light would completely destroy your eye, but the nerve fibers, the blood that's inside there, are going to protect your eye. Atheist Ed Buckner said the human eye was poorly designed. He said it was wired backwards. He said the octopus had a much better eye. So you can switch eyes with the octopus if you like, but you're not going to last more than an hour without going blind, because the UV light's going to burn your eyes away. This argument is saying God wouldn't do this way, so it must have evolved. And this is, of course, a silly way to argue for evolution. When you realize we are a copy of 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 a copy, and etc., it's amazing that things still work. Let me show you an example. This right here is a 1st generation copy. Here's a 5th generation copy. You see how it's starting to go away? The 10th generation copy. You see how you're not seeing the ink as much? 15th generation copy. You can barely even read what it says now. If you look at the top, you see the 1st generation copy, and the bottom a 15th generation copy. At 25 years per generation, in 6,000 years, we're about the 240 generation from Adam. It's amazing that the gene code had been copied so many times, and it's still had to be read. You know, John K. Stevens said, "It would take a minimum of 100 years of Cray computer time to simulate what takes place in your eye many times every second." And you know, this textbook says that the human eye may be the product of a million years of evolution. This textbook says you're better understanding how the eye might have evolved if you picture a series of changes during the evolution of the eye. So they're basically saying if you just imagine it, it'll happen. See right here? You must picture or imagine evolution, since we never observe it in the present. It only takes place in your imagination. That's lie number 16. The eyes are too complex to evolve, and imagining it is not science. Psalms 94:8-9 says, Understand, ye brutish among the people, and ye fools, when you will be wise. He that planted the ear, shall he not hear? He that formed the eye, shall he not see? Webster Dictionary says that science is something that our systematic knowledge derived from observation, study, and etc. You have to observe it and study it for it to be really science, and you can't do that with evolution. Demands a designer. Satan knows that the real study of God's creation will draw men to God. Psalms 8:34 says, "When I consider the heavens, the work of thy fingers, the moon and the stars which thou hast ordained, what is man that thou art mindful of him?" We can prove the existence of a designer by the impossibility of the contrary. Could a tornado going through a junkyard assemble a 747? Just as a painting testifies there was a painter, a building is proof of the builder, and a watch is proof there's a watchmaker, creation is evidence of a creator. Design demands a designer. Here's a book by James Perloff. It's called Tornadoes in a Junkyard. Romans 1:20-22 says, "For the invisible things of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his eternal power and Godhead, so they are without excuse. Because that, when they knew God, they glorified him not as God, neither were thankful, but became vain in their imaginations, and their foolish heart was darkened. Professing themselves to be wise, they became fools." This right here is the world's largest rock group. Could you believe that rain and wind could have carved this over millions and billions of years? I don't think so. Well, in this textbook here says how plants adapted to their environment. The pitcher plant has adapted to help it get nitrogen. This right here says the gills are adaptation to living water. Why not say designed? See, the textbooks avoid the word design because that means there had to be a designer. So they always call it an adaptation or it adapted. This right here says the modern amphibians have adapted. Have the tires adapted to fit rims, or were they designed that way? This is the Casio Databank watch. It holds 300 phone numbers, a calculator, stopwatch, an alarm clock, a countdown timer. It doesn't tell time though. You have to look at it. And it's made in Japan and it costs less than $70. And you don't have to see the designer to know that he exists. You could just see this amazing design and know there had to be a designer. Walt Brown says evolutionists argue against design using arguments they designed. This is a great book showing how the complex living systems cannot evolve piece by piece. Even the hair from a bacteria is a complex motor. It can actually rotate up to 100,000 revolutions per minute. The motor is so tiny that 8 million of them would fit on the cross-section of a human hair. As things get smaller, the fluid they move feels thicker. So a bacteria swimming through water is like a person swimming through peanut butter. And they do it at about 80 miles an hour. This is the model of Dinosaur Adventureland. This book right here says humans probably evolved from a bacteria that lived more than 4 billion years ago. The bacteria can swim through its world in the equivalent of a man swimming at 60 miles an hour, but they've actually found out that it's swimming like 80 miles an hour. We need to sign them up for the Olympics. If we evolve from them, we're getting worse, not better. Line number 17. There's no evidence for anything evolving. This is a great book called Exploding the Big Bang. It's a great book showing that even the simplest things cannot evolve. Is claiming there's a designer a stealth attack on evolution? No. This is an attack on lies that we use to support evolution, that's all. What about the origin of life? Paul Davies says, no one knows how a mixture of lifeless chemicals spontaneously organize themselves into the first living cells. Davies was once described by the Washington Times as the best science writer on either side of the Atlantic. And Genesis 1:21 said, And God created great whales and every living creature that moveth, which the waters brought forth abundantly after their kind, and every winged fowl after their kind. And God saw that it was good. God claims that he created life. But see, this book right here says the history of life began approximately 3.5 billion years ago. How did this occur? It has been and will continue to be the topic for inquiry. Green translation. It's okay to inquire how life evolved, but it's not okay to inquire whether life evolved. What about the Urey experiment? In the 1950s, Urey turned his attention to studying the geochemistry, astrophysicists, and the origin of life. He wanted to know how the Earth and solar system came to be. His vast knowledge in biology, physics, and chemistry helped him conduct research and write many articles on geochemistry. He reviewed many of the theories on how the sun and planets were formed. He studied the chemical reactions of gases that existed in Earth's primitive atmosphere, and he was the first to show that amino acids could have formed in the atmosphere. Although he never proved how life originated, he did add evidence to the theory of life that could start by itself in primitive Earth. Are you sure about that? He says that he proved how life could have started by itself. See, this book right here says the origin of life. It says it was swirling in the waters of the ocean as a bubbling broth of complex chemicals. Progress from a complex chemical soup to a living organism is very slow. That's right, boys and girls. It's so slow that it never even happened. In these articles right here say that clay could have encouraged the first cells to form. All four of them say that. But yet in Genesis 2:17 it says, "And the Lord formed man in the dust of the ground, and breathed to his nostrils a breath of life, and the man became a living soul." Genesis 3:19 says, "In the sweat of thy face shalt thou eat bread, and thou return to the ground, for out of the waste thou wast taken. For dust thou art, and dust thou shalt return." You know, the secular scientists are slowly climbing the mountain of truth, and when they get to the top, they'll find out the Baptists have been right there all along. So this is an article right here called "Scientists Crack the 40-Year-Old DNA Puzzle and Point to Hot Soup as the Origin of Life." Where there's soup, there's life. Another article, the gourmet geochemical primordial soup. The life of the universe takes order from space. Again, centuries ago, when biologists used to talk about the primordial soup. Origin of species not addressed in 1959, and it's still a mystery in 1998. Both the origin of life and the origin of major groups of the animals remain unknown. Now it's from Alfred Fischer in 1998. What about the Urey experiment, though? You know, the students are taught that life evolved from non-living material. And it talks about this Urey experiment. It talks about what exactly he did. This is the proof of the evolution of life. Many important events occurred during the Archean era, the most important of which was the evolution of life. Process from complex molecules to even the smallest living organisms was a long process. It was so long it never happened. This book says the first living cells emerged between 4 billion and 3.8 billion years ago. There's no record of the event, though. The first self-replicating systems must have emerged in this organic soup. Line number 18. There's no evidence that came from soup or that life came from non-living material. Haeckel finally confessed. Haeckel complained also that spontaneous generation must be true, not because it had been proven in the laboratory, but because otherwise it would be necessary to believe in a creator. So it has to be true, not because there's proof, it's because the only alternative is to have a creator. So have scientists produce life in a lab? The Miller-Urey experiment. It says Miller simulated the Earth's conditions as hypothesized by Operin, Urey, and other scientists. His experiments produced the chemicals of life. Did he really produce the chemicals of life? Well, let's see what happened. In this article, in this textbook, it says, about that time that Miller discovered that the red goo at the bottom of his flask was rich in amino acids. Was it rich in amino acids? Let's see what it says. So what he did, he took methane, ammonia, water vapor, and hydrogen, and he basically took electrodes and he shocked it. Nope, he didn't produce life in a lab. Didn't even come close. Miller excluded oxygen, in a reducing atmosphere because he knew that life could not evolve with oxygen present. Any amino acid that try to combine are going to be oxidized. So the problem, ozone is made from oxygen and it blocks UV light. Ammonia is destroyed by UV. So without oxygen, you can't block UV light. If you don't block UV light, you can't have ammonia. Life cannot evolve without oxygen. And Evolution of Theory in Crisis says the Earth has always had oxygen, even more than today. Oxygen is found in the lowest rocks. Philip Anderson said, "What is the evidence for a primitive methane ammonia atmosphere on the Earth?" The answer is there's no evidence for it, but much against it. That's back in '66. In general, we find no evidence of sedimentary distribution of carbon, sulfur, uranium, or iron, that an oxygen-free atmosphere has existed at any time during the span of the geological history recorded in the well-preserved sedimentary rocks. That was back in '76. It suggested that from the time of the Earth's earliest dated rocks, at 3.7 billion years ago, Earth had an oxygenic atmosphere. That was back in '82. The only trend of the recent literature is suggested of far more oxygen in the early atmosphere than anyone imagined. That was in '92. Primordial air may have been breathable. The Earth may have had an oxygen-rich atmosphere as long ago as 3 billion years ago, or possibly even earlier. That's in 2002. So this right here I found very interesting. It says right here there was no oxygen, but the rocks absorbed it. So if there was no oxygen, how could the rocks absorb it? The other problem is they filtered out the product. That's not realistic for nature. The product was made of 85% tar, 13% carboxylic acid, which are both toxic to life, and only 2% amino acids. And the problem number one is most of the 2 amino acids were produced, but 20 different ones are needed for life. And those amino acids are going to bond with the tar and the acid, basically killing them. Amino acids are like letters, which are building blocks to make words, to make paragraphs, to make books. He made the equivalent of a few letters when he needed to make a huge book. Half the amino acids he produced were left-handed, and half were right-handed. The smallest proteins have 70 to 100 amino acids in a precise order, and they're all left-handed. DNA and RNA nucleotides are all right-handed. This was a very puzzling fact. All the proteins that have been investigated originated from animals and from plants, from higher organisms, and from simple organisms. Bacteria, molds, or even viruses are found to be made of left-handed amino acids. Hundreds of amino acids must combine to make proteins, yet they unbind in water faster than they bond. And the oceans are full of water. Brownian motion drives them away from each other to equilibrium, not together. Law number 19. No one has come close to making life in a lab. The mixture he made was poisonous. Scientists have not been able to cause amino acids dissolved in water to join together to form proteins. The energy requiring chemical reactions that join amino acids are reversible and do not occur spontaneously in water. At this time, however, no one can say whether the theory is right or wrong. What can be said is that somehow, through some process, the chemicals that made up living things did group themselves together and force the first living cells. That was called Cells, the Building Blocks of Life. So this is a great book about the fatal flaws of the Miller-Urey experiment. It's called Icons of Evolution. If that's all needed for life to evolve and having all the proper molecules in the same place and by adding energy, put a frog in a blender and turn it on. You're going to have everything you need to create life right there in that blender. What about the tree of life? This is a typical textbook of the tree of life. It shows you have bacteria down here, humans are up there. And 1 Corinthians 15:39 says, all flesh, not the same flesh, but there is one kind of flesh for men, another flesh for beasts, another of fish, and another of birds. But yet you see these trees all over the textbook saying that we had an ancient ancestor that came out through all these different things. Mary Leakey said, all these trees of life with their branches of our ancestors, it's a lot of nonsense. Stephen Jay Gould said, "The evolutionary tree that adorns our textbooks have data only the tips and nodes of their branches. The rest are inference, however reasonable, not the evidence of fossils." Glencoe Biology says, "All the many forms of life on Earth today are descended from a common ancestor, found in a population of primitive unicellular organisms. What were the first cells like? How do we know? What events led up to their formation? No traces of these events remain, and scientists can't travel backwards in time to witness what happened. Instead, they turn to scientific methods for observing data, forming hypotheses, making predictions, and constructing experiments to test their predictions. Since they have come from primitive unicellular organisms, so humans, birds, crocodiles, an ancestral amphibian. But see, everything inside this circle is religious speculation. Outside is science. Lie number 20. These trees are based upon imagination, not on science. Matthew 18:6, Jesus said, "Whosoever shall offend one of these little ones which believe in me, it will be better for him that a millstone were hanged around his neck, and he were drowned in the depths of the sea." They say smaller is simpler. Here's a paramecium. It's single-celled, but it's not simple. Lie number 21. Smaller does not make simple. The cell, the smallest living thing, what makes it tick? A single-celled organism like a paramecium is more complex than a space shuttle. Just because it's small does not mean it's simple. Here's a microchip inside of a paperclip. Here's an ant holding a computer chip, and it can process all the letters of the Bible 20 times in a second. The honeybee's brain compared to a supercomputer. This is a supercomputer, the Cray computer. The honeybee's brain compared to a supercomputer. The supercomputer is huge. The honeybee's brain is small. What about a speed? So the computer can do 6 billion units a second. The honeybee can do 100 billion things a second. What about the energy consumption? The Cray computer has many megawatts. The bee is 10 microwatts. Do you know that the honeybee has the greatest miles per gallon you could possibly imagine? A honeybee can fly 1 million miles with 1 gallon of honey. What about the cost? The Cray computer has lots of money. The honeybee's cheap. You smack it on your window every now and then. It takes many people to keep up with the Cray computer. Nobody to take care of the bee. The Cray computer weighs 2,300 pounds, but the bee's not much. The supercomputer is huge, slow, ineffective. It costs lots of money. It must be maintained, and it had to be designed. The human brain is millions of times more complex than that of the honeybees. Here's a memory capacity in bits. C.S. Lewis says, "There are all sorts of different reasons for believing in God, and here I will mention only one. This is, supposing there was no intelligence behind the universe, no creative mind, in that case nobody designed my brain for the purpose of thinking. It is merely that when atoms inside my skull happen for physical or chemical reasons to arrange themselves in a certain way, this gives me a byproduct, the sensation I call thought. But if so, how can I trust my own thinking to be true? It's like upsetting a milk jug and hoping the way that it splashes arranges itself, and it'll give you a map of London. But if I cannot trust my own thinking, of course I cannot trust the arguments leading to atheism, and therefore the reason to be an atheist or anything else. Unless I believe in God, I cannot believe in thought or anything else, so I can never use thought to disbelieve in God. If the human brain is nothing but 3 pounds of chemicals that arrange themselves by chance over billions of years, then how can you trust your thoughts and conclusions you come by? What about DNA-proven evolution? This whole biology book says there's evidence for molecular biology. It says right here that Darwin speculated that all forms of life are related through descent with modification from earliest organisms. This speculation has been verified. Awesome. Line number 22. Nothing about evolution has been verified by DNA. The DNA chromosomes are the most complicated molecules in the universe. It is a gross oversimplification to say that DNA, only has 4 basic parts. Each of those parts are extremely complex. The average human has over 50 trillion cells. The total DNA from all these cells would fit in about 2 tablespoons. But if you stretch it out and unravel them, all the chromosomes from one person would stretch out, laid end to end. It would stretch to the moon and back 550,000 times. The code of the chromosomes are more complex and holds more information than all the computer programs ever written by man combined. IBM models its newest computers after DNA. The quantity of information is so vast, we have to invent new numbers to measure it. It's not just terabytes, or petabytes, or exabytes, or eulabytes, or zettabytes. All the words ever uttered and everybody who ever lived would amount to 5 exabytes. But yet DNA is very complex. If the information contained in all the chromosomes of one human being, if you typed it out, it would fill enough books to fill Grand Canyon 78 times. Psalms 139:14 says, I will praise thee, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. From conception until birth, the baby adds 15,000 cells per minute to its body. And each cell is more complicated than a space shuttle. The probability of just one DNA arranging itself by chance has been calculated to 1 chance in 10 to the 119,000th power. The entire visible universe is only 10 to 28 inches in diameter. Even with DNA sequence data, we have no direct access to the process of evolution, so the objective reconstruction of vanishing past can be achieved only by creative imagination. Mitochondrial DNA mutation rates show we have a common ancestor about 3,000 generations ago. At 20 years, it's about 6,000 years. Researchers suggest that visually all modern men, 99% of them, says one scientist, are closely related genetically and share genes with one male ancestor, dubbed X chromosome Adam. We are finding that humans have very, very shallow genetic roots, which go back recently to one ancestor. This indicates there was an origin for a specific location on the globe, and then it spread out from there. If evolution is true, it seems logical that the more chromosomes an organism has, the further it evolved. And since penicillin only has 2 organisms, it must have evolved first. After penicillin, it turns into a fruit fly, and then of course you have the twins, a tomato and a housefly. And then if you get even further, you can turn into a kidney bean, a redwood, and a possum. They're triplets. I want to let you guys scientists know, this is a possum. This is a redwood, and this is a kidney bean. This is the evolutionist. See, there's the redwood, there's the possum, there's the kidney bean, and there's the evolutionist. See, if you keep going further, you become a human, which has 46 chromosomes. And we all know that if we live long enough, we can turn into a tobacco. The dog and chickens are twins. And if we live long enough, we can turn into a fern. A carp only has 100. Everybody in the world wants to be a fern. I mean, who doesn't want to be a fern? What if we grouped them in how long things live? A hamster doesn't live very long. And a box turtle is the longest thing that lives right now that we know of. What if we evolve things in the life forms based upon their gestation period? A dog and a cat, 62 days. Elephant is 640 days. What if we did evolution on various life forms based upon their weight? Blue whales, the heaviest thing that we know of. If amphibians evolved before mammals, why do some amphibians have 5 times more DNA than mammals, and some amoeba have 1,000 times more DNA? The really significant finding that comes to light comparing these protein amino acid sequences is that it's impossible to arrange them in any sort of evolutionary series. There's little doubt that if the medical evidence has been valuable a century ago, the idea of organic evolution may never have been accepted. This article right here talks about discovery should speed up crop improvements. So they show you all these different things here. They say rice has about 37,500 genes. See this book right here, that's Think Critically. Building on what you've learned, as you learned from Chapter 2, all living things are made of proteins from the same 20 kinds of amino acids. Explain how this fact supports the idea that all life shares a common ancestor. Line number 23. This shows a common creator. This booklet right here talks about how the different monkey groups turn into different people and different monkeys. You see, the orangutan and the gorilla is 96.3% similar. And 15 million years ago, we had a common ancestor. This right here talks about the DNA sequence revealing our closest kinship to chimpanzees. It says overall, the nucleotide sequence of humans and chimpanzees differ about 1.6%. But the Human Genome Project says similar DNA codes prove the same designer wrote the code, not in evolution. So the Genome Project says Dr. Barney Malik, a lead genetic genome researcher, said, concerning these genetic differences, now the genetic difference between humans and his nearest relative, the chimpanzee, is at least 1.6%. It doesn't sound like much, but I calculated out, this is a gap of at least 48 million nucleotides. When a change of just 3 nucleotides is fatal to an animal, there is no possibility of a change. And this article right here talks about how, in the Washington Post, that maybe we're only 98.5% identical. And then Britain concludes that maybe it's only 95% identical. This right here talks about maybe we have 7.7% difference. That's back in 2004. But Discover Magazine back in 2006 says we have a 2% difference. So the human chip DNA differed treble. So September of 2002, it said, the new value came to light when Roy Benton of the California Institute of Technology became suspicious about the 98.5% figure. Ironically, the number was originally derived from a technique that Benton himself developed decades ago, which was done by his colleague. By measuring the temperature at which matching DNA of 2 species come apart, you can work out how different they are. So basically, what they did is they heated up the DNA, and when they separated, they said, oh wow, they separate at the same time, they must be similar. When Britain compared 5 stretches of chimp DNA with the corresponding piece of human DNA, he found the single base substitutions accounted for a difference of 1.4%, very close to the expected figure. But he also found that the DNA of both species were littered with indels. His comparisons revealed that they add around another 4% to the genetic differences. The result is based upon 1 billion DNA bases out of 3 billion. So basically, he only had he only found that 1 million DNA based upon 3 billion. So it's 1 in 3,000%. The function of 1%, some say 3% of DNA, human DNA is being determined. If 95% or 98.6% of the small amount similar to chimps, it still does not prove a common ancestry. French and American scientists have mapped chromosome 14, the longest sequence to date, and they cite more than 60 disease genes, including one linked to onset Alzheimer's. This feat enlisted nearly 100 researchers, and it marks fourth of the 24 human chromosome maps so far. Scientists at Genoscope, the French National Sequencing Center, said the chromosome is compromising more than 87 billion pairs of DNA, all of which have been sequenced so that the chromosome map includes no gaps. At the present time, this is the longest piece of continuous DNA that's been sequenced. We made an effort to close the gaps. The researchers described the chromosome 14 and its 87,410,661 pairs of DNA, a fraction of the total 3 billion pairs found in the human genome. And if Stalin tried to sit there and mix human DNA with chimp DNA, with apes DNA, he wanted to make an invincible human being. And it found out that in 1991, he established the world's first center for the artificial insemination of racehorses. The experiments, unsurprisingly, from what we know, were a total failure. He returned to the Soviet Union only to see experiments in Georgia to use monkey sperm and human volunteers. This article right here talks about junk DNA. I don't think so. See, what they did is they basically took this DNA and they put this junk DNA in mice. And basically what they found out, that it's very possible that the pseudo-DNA may function as decoy to lure away destructive enzymes. More gene than junk. Jenny Lee, a geneticist at the Howard Hughes Medical Institute in Boston, suspects the cytogene may function as a decoy to lure away destructive enzymes. And this is a bunch of articles about junk DNA. This article was really interesting. It says everyone in the world is descended from a single person who lived around 3,500 years ago, according to a new study. Well, I even know what his name is. His name was Noah. Scientists have worked out the most recent common ancestor of all 6 billion people alive today, probably dwelled in Eastern Asia around 1415 BC. Although the dates seem relatively recent, researchers say the findings should not come as a surprise. Anyone trying to trace their family tree soon discovers that the number of direct ancestors doubles every 20 to 30 years. It only takes a few centuries to clock up thousands of ancestors. And I find it interesting they're saying that it looks like it came from a single person around 3,500 years ago. And Noah's Ark would have happened 4,400 years ago. So they're actually getting really close. This right here talked about the very first ancestor probably lived around 5,353 BC. It says, nevertheless, our results suggest that the most recent common ancestor for the world's current population lived in relatively recent past, perhaps with a few thousand years. And that's interesting because the Bible dates date back to about 4,000 BC. And they're saying it's about 5,353 BC. They're getting closer. And yes, we had a common ancestor. His name was Adam. And the mitochondria, along with as many 1,000 more just like it, it's a powerhouse of the cell. You know they mapped out the mitochondrial Eve? It says right here, if molecular evolution is really neutral at these sites, and it occurs at a constant rate, such a high mutation rate would indicate that Eve lived around 6,500 years ago, a figure clearly incompatible with current theories on human origins. So again, 6,500 years ago, we say it's about 6,000 years ago, so that's getting really close. Using our empirical rate of calibrate the mitochondrial DNA molecular clock would result in an average age of the most recent ancestor about 6,500 years ago. Like I said, 6,000 is pretty close. Similar structures nearly always have similar plans. Similar bridges have similar blueprints. This hardly constitutes evidence that one side or the other, that we were not erected by tornadoes. Man has a very good understanding of how cars operate. Understanding the operation of a machine does not prove how it originated or that it didn't have a designer. You know, imagine your kid comes to you and says, Dad, I'm now 16. I want to drive the car. What if you just give him pieces of the car? You know, let it evolve over time. That'd be a good way to teach your kid how to drive. Also, there are thousands of differences between humans and chips. The hands are different, the feet are different, the hair's different, the brain's different, neck, hips, back, everything. There's many different things different between humans and chimps. However, if percent of similarity proves relationships, understand that clouds are 100% water. Watermelon 97% water. Jellyfish are 98% water. So are snow cones. So basically, relationship shows that a watermelon turned into a jellyfish or a snow cone, and that evolved into a cloud. What about fossils proving evolution? This book right here says there's a fossil record. Here's the evolution in the fossil record. Evidence for evolution in the fossil record. Line number 24. There can be no proof of evolution in the fossils. This article says the fossil record provides some of the strongest evidence that species evolved over time. This is silly. There is no fossil record. There's bones in the dirt. And you can't look back at the fossil record. Fossils only exist in the present. All we can do is put our interpretation on them. This right here says, since science can date fossils by using radioactive decay, fossils can contribute to understanding our evolution. Keep in mind that dead animals do not reproduce or evolve. Charles Darwin said, if my theory be true, numberless intermediate varieties must surely have existed. And it says right here, since Darwin, many links have been found. But David Roop said, In the years after Darwin, his advocates hoped to find predictable progressions. In general, these have not been found, yet the opposition had died hard, and so pure fantasy had crept into the textbooks. This right here from Belitsky says, there are gaps in the fossil graveyard, places that should be intermediate forms where there is not. Darwin's theory and the fossil record are in conflict. According to Stephen Gould of Harvard, arthropods, the largest animal group, where do they come from? As Darwin noted in The Origin of Species, the abrupt emergence of arthropods in the fossil record during the Cambrian presents a problem for evolution biologists. There's no obvious simple or intermediate forms, either living or in the fossil record. Where did all the fish come from? The transition from spineless vertebrates to the first backbone fish is still shrouded in mystery, and many theories abound. Where did the birds come from? The true origin of birds is still up in the air. What about whales? The evolutionary origin of whales remains controversial among zoologists. How about flowering plants? The origins of the first angiosperms, an abominable mystery to Darwin, remain so 100 years later and is still no better today. In summary, both the origin of life and the origin of the major groups of animals remain unknown. So this is artist's conception showing the ancient crocodile. It basically says he showed up about 3.7 million years ago. 375 million years ago. And a fossil shows how fish made it to land. Look at this. But here's a question. Why would it come to the land? Who did it marry? What did it eat? Did it learn to breathe first, or did it learn to walk first? And how could fossils transform but living ones can't? If you find a fossil in the dirt, all you know is it died. You don't know if it had any kids, let alone different kids. And why do evolutionists claim that bones in the dirt can do something that living animals cannot? Luther Sunderland asked evolutionists about their evidence that they had for the theory. The British Museum of Natural History has the largest fossil collection in the world. When the senior paleontologist was asked why he did not show the missing links in his book, this is what he said. I fully agree with your comments about the lack of evolutionary transition in my book. If I knew of any fossil or living, I certainly would have included them. I'll lay it on the line, there is no such fossil. There's no missing links, the whole chain's missing. The absence of fossil evidence for intermediate stages had been a persistent and nagging problem for evolutionists. And Stephen Gould said that because he comes out with this idea of punctuated equilibrium. He says maybe the first bird hatched from a reptilian egg. And this book says you have two choices. Either gradualism, means it happened really slowly, or punctuated equilibrium, meaning it happened so fast. This article says really funny. Think critically. The fossil record shows that an organism evolved through many small changes over time. Which theory best describes organism evolution? Did it happen slowly, or did it happen quickly? And explain. What about the third option? It didn't happen at all. God created it. How do you think critically when you give them a brainwashing technique? So here's what they're saying. You only have two choices. Either it happened slowly like Darwin said, or it happened quickly like Gould said. They don't seem capable of willing to think outside the box. The option that evolution didn't even happen at all, and it seems to dawn on them. When Dr. Hovind debated Dr. Pigliucci from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville, he said, Dr. Pigliucci, you have studied and taught courses on the evolution of plants for 10 years. You have received and spent over $650,000 in grant money to study the evolution of plants. What is the best evidence you have for evolution? He replied, the evolution of whales. He claims that the hippo is evidence for evolution because it's in the process of adapting to an aquatic way of life. He also claimed that the flying squirrel is evidence because it has half a wing. This man has spent 10 years and $650,000 studying the evolution of plants, and he says it's the evolution of whales? It's like a big shell game. Which one of these is it under? Is it the biologist, the anthropologist, the geologist? Evolution is a cell game with only one difference. There's no P under any of them. What about the horse evolution? This textbook talks about the horse evolution. Look, boys and girls, it started from this little small creature and developed into a horse. Line number 25. The horse evolution has been proven wrong over 50 years ago. This right here is the Hydrax. This is what it looks like. The Hydrax is still alive today in Turkey and Africa, and it has no relationship to a horse. But they'll tell you, boys and girls, it started off looking like this and it turned into a horse. And here's a question. The Hydrax, this first animal has 18 pairs of ribs. Interesting. Next one has 15 pairs of ribs. Looks like it lost 3 of them. Oh, it went back up to 19. Oh, it gained 4 more. Oh, then it lost 1 again. Very interesting. How is this even possible? Here's an Irish textbook. There's quite a few variety of horses today. You have really small ones and you have really big ones. Many examples commonly cited, such as the evolution of the horse family or the saber-toothed tigers, can be readily shown to have been intentionally falsified, and it's not ready to be orthogenic. The early classical evolutionary tree of the horse was all wrong. The uniform, consistently transition of Hydrax into Equus is so dear to the hearts of generations of textbook writers, it never happened in nature. Other examples include the much repeated gradual evolution of the modern horse have not held up to close examination. So here's some problems with the horse evolution. Number 1, it was made up by Mr. Marsh in 1874 from fossils scattered all around the world and not from one location. Modern horses are found in layers and lower than the ancient horses. The ancient horse, the Hydrax, is still not a horse. It still looks like the Hydrax today in eastern Turkey and eastern African Turkey. The ribs, the toes, and the teeth are different. South American fossils go from 1-toed to 3-toed in reverse order. Never found in the order it is presented. The 3-toed and the 1-toed horses graze side by side. The Tulsa Zoo right here says it was a petition signed by 2,000 area residents, plus a scientifically conducted poll showing that over 2/3 of the city's population believed the zoo should not promote evolution. Was able recently to persuade city officials to remove the exhibits on horse evolution and human evolution from displays in the zoo. Hicks and his co-workers credited the influence to the Institute for Creation Research materials would play a significant part of this action, and also suggested that citizens in other communities should undertake similar projects. And look right here, the horse evolution is still on display at the Peabody Museum in Yale. Again, Icons of Evolution is an excellent book showing the fatal flaws of the horse evolution story. You know, arranging animals in order on paper does not prove their relationship. Line number 26. Artificially arranging objects does not prove relationship. You know, if somebody's buried on top of a hamster, it doesn't make their hamster their grandfather. You know, Dr. Holman spent a lot of time piecing together the fragmented evidence. He reconstructed the evolution of silverware. You know, conclusively, evidence that this specimen is slightly bigger show mass extinctions and millions of years of natural selection, causing evolution to a process to produce a new species. He saw these 4 things here and thought, man, there must be a missing link. Wow, what's going on? And then he discovered it. The first one here was discovered by Dr. Holman while on board the U.S. Airlines in 1994. And the second one discovered in Popeye's Fried Chicken in 1994. So now he's finally got the full thing. You know, many mutants did not survive over the years. And as people found out that he was doing research on fork evolution, many sent him as fines. Some were hoping for fame and fortune. And many frauds, such as this obvious fork head on a spoon handle, have also been submitted into evidence in this cutthroat business. But his highly trained eye caught it right away. He even found the diverse species to evolve in different races. I mean, you know how dumb that sounds? I mean, look, you can take a dog and turn it into a cot and a cat, but if you keep changing one letter, you're going to eventually turn it into a fool. What about dinosaurs turning into birds? Genesis 1 said, "And God said, let the waters bring forth abundantly the moving creatures that had life, and fowl that may fly above the earth in an open firmament of heaven, and every winged fowl after his kind. Let fowl multiply on the earth, and the evening and the morning were the 5th day." So God said birds are made on day 5. And God said, let the earth bring forth the living creatures after his kind, cattle, and creeping thing, and the beasts of the earth, and everything that creepeth upon the earth after his kind the sixth day. God says the reptiles were made on day 6. Job 30:29 says, I am a brother to dragons, and a companion to owls. Isaiah 34:13 says, and thorns come up in the palaces, needles and brambles in the fortresses. Therefore should be the inhabitants of dragons and the courts of owls. Isaiah 43:20 says, the beasts of the field shall honor me, the dragons and the owls. Her article says, dinosaurs alive as birds. Now, this is line number 27. This is absurd. This article says it's a bird, it's a dinosaur. They talked about the Archaeopteryx, the Archaeoraptor. Breaking news. Look at this. Here's the flying bird. And they even have it in this National Geographic in October of 99. Dinosaur bird smashed under the fossil flap. A missing link dinosaur bird feathered in National Geographic magazine. Archaeoraptor is an unofficial name for this fossil. It's actually two animals pieced together. It was either an honest mistake made by discoverers in China or a breathtaking forgery. Interesting. But Soros Orson, creator of the birds at the Smithsonian Institute Natural History Museum, and his outspoken skeptic of the bird dinosaur link, says he warned the magazine in November when the article was published that there was a serious problem with the fossil. Interesting. In China, they had a usual dinosaur fossil, made a mysterious journey in the hands of Chinese smugglers in the polished halls of National Geographic in Washington. And like some curse from a mommy's tomb, the Archaeoraptor, supposedly a bird-like creature with the tail of a meat-eating dinosaur, is brought to those who will possess it and will be remembered in modern paleontology's greatest embarrassment. It appears now, after several months of speculation and consternation, that the true missing link of the complex chain between dinosaurs and birds somehow sprouted its remarkable tale, not 120 million years ago, but only shortly before being smuggled into China. Whether a deliberate fake or an honest mistake, the tale of a tale that had children believing in feathered dinosaurs that never existed, prominent scientists calling each other names, and two respected science publications under assault. And just as the plot thickens, the scientists in China have told USA Today that they discovered another fake tale. This one added an entrepreneurial Chinese farmer to a flying pterosaur. This one appears to have fooled another group of scientists as well as the editors of the British Natural Journal. Soros Orson, creator of the birds at the Smithsonian Institute Natural History Museum, turned the spotlight on this whole mess. This involved with the scientific gaffe agreed that Olson's tried to warn officials at National Geographic in a letter sent November 1st that the organization was headed for embarrassment if it endorsed the fossil. Both the fake fossils were intended to support the theory that birds evolved into dinosaurs. Now Olson, who is an outspoken opponent of the theory, is taking advantage of this moment to renew the old debate of the origin of birds. The popular view, thanks mostly to the fictional Jurassic Park, is that birds evolved from dinosaurs. National Geographic and Nature have co-published magazine articles and scientific papers supporting their view. Museums, including the American Museum of Natural History in New York, also promotes exhibits of the dinosaur origin of birds. But Olson and a group of academic ornithologists have been arguing, often bitterly, for years that birds evolved independently of dinosaurs. They believe that dinosaurs and birds have a common ancestor that lived in trees, that dinosaurs were, after all, cold-blooded. Here's an article from Impact Magazine. Archaeoraptor, feathered dinosaur from National Geographic, doesn't fly. Scientific America says, an article of the ornithologists Richard Perham and Alan Bush titled The Feather or the Bird, Which Came First, reiterated the classic evolutionary thesis that birds evolved from dinosaurs from a new series of findings and hypotheses and dino bird illustrations designed to visually influence the reader. So determined were Solomon and Bush that they imagined that they put an end to the continued debate among evolutionists regarding the origin of birds, and suggested their finds had revealed a remarkable conclusion, that the feather evolved in dinosaurs before the appearance of birds. Perham and Bush maintained that the bird feather evolved from the purposes of insulation, water propellancy, courtship, camouflage, and defense, and only lastly being used for flight. However, this assertive thesis actually consists of nothing more than speculation devoid of any scientific evidence. This new thesis developed by Perham and Bush, adopted by Scientific America, is nothing but a new but hollow version of the birds were dinosaurs theory, which had been defended by the furious and blind fanaticism of the last few decades, which shall be demonstrated in this paper. Looking at Perlman versus article, their bird evolution thesis appear to rest on two bases. Number one, fossils in China in recent years have claimed to be those of feathered dinosaurs. And number two, Perlman-Busch efforts to come up with an evolutionary pathway by examining the development of modern bird feathers, in line with a concept called evolutionary development biology, also called Evo-Devo, which assumes that the developmental pathways of living things can shed light on their alleged evolutionary histories. Let's see how exactly both these foundations are invalid. Feathered dinosaurs, or dinobirds, have been one of the Darwinian media propaganda tools for the last decade. A stream of headlining hitting dinobird reports, artist reconstructions, and announcements by self-confident experts have convinced a great many people that half-bird, half-dinosaur creatures once walked the earth. Perlman-Busch maintained this self-confident approach and portrayed dinobirds as a concrete fact in their Scientific American article. The truth, however, is very different. We shall be relying on the views of a very important name, Dr. Alan Fiducia, of North Carolina University Department of Biology. Dr. Fiducia is one of the world's prominent authorities on the subject of the origin of birds. Dr. Fiducia actually supports the theory of evolution, and he believes that birds emerged through evolution. However, what distinguishes him from dinobird supporters such as Perlman-Busch is that he admits the uncertainty in which the theory of evolution finds itself on this matter, and attaches no credence whatsoever to the dinobird hype passionately brought forth by lacking a foundation at all. In an article titled "Birds or Dinosaurs? Simple Answers to a Complex Problem," Dr. Fiducia, the latest edition of the magazine, published by American Ornithologists Union and serving as a platform for the most technical debates in the field, containing some highly important information. In considerable detail, Dr. Fiducia described how the theory of birds evolved from dinosaurs, first proposed by John Orstrom in 1970 and fiercely defended ever since, lacks any scientific proof, and how such evolutionary is actually impossible. Dr. Fiducia reveals one of the most important facts about the alleged dinobirds found in China. It is not at all clear that the feathers found in fossils purportedly belonging to feathered dinosaurs are birds' feathers at all, albeit primitive ones. On the contrary, there is a considerable body of evidence that these fossil traces, known as dinofuzz, have nothing to do with feathers, Fiducia writes. Having studied most of the specimens said to sport protofeathers, I and many others do not find any credible evidence that these structures represent photofeathers. Many Chinese fossils that have the strange halo of what has been known as dinofuzz, but altogether the material has been homologized with avian feathers. The argument are far less convincing. Following this analysis, Dr. Fiducia states that Pram, the author of the scientific article, has behaved in a prejudicial manner. Prim's views shared by many paleontologists, birds or dinosaurs, therefore any flameous material preserved by dromaeosaurs must represent protofeathers. According to Dr. Fiducia, one of the reasons why this prejudice fails to stand up to scrutiny is that this dinofuzz also appears on fossils that have nothing to do with birds. Most importantly, dinofuzz is now being discovered in a number of taxa, some unpublished, but in particular by a Chinese pterosaur, flying reptile. In their carnivorous dinosaur class, most surprisingly, skin fibers closely resemble to dinofuzz have been discovered in a Jurassic ichthyosaur. Dr. Fiducia recalls similar structures have been found in areas of fossils in the past, but these structures believed to belong to fossils were later identified as inorganic material. One is reminded of the famous fern-like markings of the fossils known as the dendrites. Despite their plant-like origin, these features are known for inorganic structures caused by a solution of manganese from these beds that recapitulate oxidized along cracks of the bones of fossils. One must explain also why the theropods and other dinosaurs discovered in other deposits where interregment is preserved inhabit no dinofuzz but true reptile skin. Dr. Fiducia explains that some of these creatures put forward as feathered dinosaurs are extinct reptiles with dinofuzz, and others are real birds. So he's talking about these are theropods. The first discovered so-called feathered dinosaurs, one preserved actual avian feathers as the feathered dinosaurs that were featured on the cover of Nature, but was turned out to be secondarily flightless birds. Not one single fossil exist that might represent a transitional form between birds and reptiles. For these reasons, the argument that the existence of feathered dinosaurs had been proven, it's a complete violation of the truth. And this right here talks about dinosaurs are not birds. UNC Chapel Hill scientist says no good evidence exists to indicate that dinosaurs are ancestry of modern birds. But this book right here says birds are the descendants of dinosaurs. You know, if you take a dinosaur and put some feathers on it and say jump off, it's not going to hurt nothing, that's going to really mess with the dinosaur. I mean, think about this. If a dinosaur is transitioning from a reptile to a bird, he's going to have half a wing and half an arm. So he can't fly and he can't hunt. He's going to die. But this right here says fossils of Archaeopteryx that are 150 million years old show bird-like features and dinosaur features. What are they talking about like that? Well, they're saying right here that the earliest known bird is Archaeopteryx, which means ancient wing. Paleontologists have tried to turn Archaeopteryx into an earthbound feathered dinosaur, but it's not. It's a bird. It's a perching bird, and no amount of paleobabble is going to change that. That was what Alan Felucia said. Archaeopteryx had all the brain features of a bird equipped for flight. Archaeopteryx means ancient wing, and it says that because he has claws on his wings. But this person adds that some ornithologists called the Hoatzin primitive because it's Archaeopteryx-like claws, but he prefers to think of it as a highly specialized. Swans, ibises, many other birds have winged claws. They just don't really make much use of them. They say the Archaeopteryx had teeth. But this right here is a hummingbird that had 48 teeth in his mouth. You know, some of you have teeth and some of you don't. It doesn't mean you evolved. Like the Chinese dino bird, the Archaeopteryx is a fake also. But this right here says bird feathers evolved from the same scales that protected dinosaurs so well. But they don't understand that feathers and dinosaurs are very, very different. Can you believe this evolved by chance? Feathers and scales are both made from the protein keratin, but that proves a common designer, not a common ancestor. At the morphological level, feathers are traditionally considered homologous with reptilian scales. However, in development, morphogenesis, gene structure, protein shape and sequence, and filament formation and structure, feathers are very different. Clearly, feathers provide a unique and outstanding example of evolutionary novelty. What about the evolution of the lung? You know, reptiles, they have two-chambered lungs, where birds have a whole bunch of chambers in their lungs. Look at this bird lung right here. And how can Archaeopteryx be a missing link since fully formed birds were already present? Here's an article talking about a 130 million year old crow. In western Colorado's dry mesa quarry, Brigham Young University archaeologists have come up with a 140 million year old remains of what they are calling the oldest ever bird found. And it's much older than what the Archaeopteryx lived. Fossil remains of a bird was lived between 142 and 137 million years ago, so it cannot possibly be a descendant of dinosaurs. But there are plenty of other reasons to refute the dinosaur-bird connection, says Fiducia. How do you derive birds from a heavy earthbound bipedal reptile that has a deep body, a heavy bouncing tail, and foreskin forearms? Biophysically, it's impossible. Here's the problem with the reptile-to-bird theory. Their lungs are totally different. Modern birds are found in layers with and lower than dinosaurs. And scales and feathers attach to the body differently and develop from different genes in their chromosomes. Birds have a 4-chambered heart. Most reptiles only have 3. Reptiles lay leathery eggs, and birds lay hard eggs. And their tails, hips, and reproduction are different as well. Here's a hip bone from a bird. And here's a hip bone from a lizard. Here's another problem with reptile-to-bird evolution. The evolutionary origin of birds is largely a matter of deduction. There's no fossil evidence of the stages through which the remarkable change from reptile to bird was achieved. The experts strongly disagree about the evidence, and we don't observe it today. All they have for evidence are stories about how it might have happened, and it violates the observable science, God's word, popular opinion, and common sense. And again, Icons of Evolution is an excellent book showing the fatal flaws of the bird evolution history. Richard Dawkins said it's absolutely safe to say that if you met someone who claims not to believe in evolution, that person is ignorant, stupid, insane, or wicked. Karl Popper says evolution is not a fact. Evolution does not even qualify as a theory or hypothesis. It's a metaphysical research program. It's not even testable science. Jesus said, "Thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, with all thy soul, and with all thy mind." It's illogical and intelligent to believe in it. It's logical and intelligent to believe in a creator. John 8:44 says, "When the devil speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a father of a lie and a father of it." Michael Roux says, "Evolution is promoted by its practitioners as more than a mere science. Evolution is promulgated as the ideology of a secular religion, a full-fledged alternative to Christianity, its meaning and morality. I'm an ardent evolutionist and an ex-Christian, but I must admit that this one complaint, and Mr. Gish is one of many to make it. They're literalist and absolutely right. Evolution is religion. This was true of evolution in the beginning, and is true of evolutionary still today." Sir Arthur Keek says, "Evolution is unproven and unprovable. We believe in it only because the only alternative is special creation, and that's unthinkable." Transformism evolution is a fairy tale for adults. The theory has helped nothing in its progression of science. It's absolutely useless. This results from an explanation that his theory of evolution is not exact. Evolution is kind of a dogma which his own priests no longer believe, but it's upheld for the people. It's not necessary to have the courage to state this only if their men or future generations may orient the research to a different direction. Malcolm Muggeridge said, "I believe I am convinced that the theory of evolution, especially to the extent of which it has been applied, will be one of the greatest jokes in the history books of the future. Posterity will marvel that such a flimsy and dubious hypothesis can be accepted with the incredible cruelty that it has." Sir Fred Hoyle says, "The only way life could have come into existence is because some superintelligence has created it. Like the UFOs. Evolution is generally percolated to which all theories, all hypotheses must henceforth blow, in order to be thinkable and true. Evolutionary is a light which illuminates all facts, which all lines of thought must follow. This is what evolution is." The Psalm says, "Thy word is a lamp to the feet and a light to my path." How will you feel the word after 12 to 16 years in your school system? The question is, why would they lie? Well, they think that if everybody believes in evolution, it automatically becomes true. And they got to teach you to keep the paycheck coming in. They understand the bigger picture of how evolution is founded is the foundation of the New World Order. Why do people believe in evolution? Well, for one, that's all they've been taught. Here's an excellent book about the Busy Truth series. It's called The Case Against Darwin: Why the Evidence Should Be Examined. People believe in evolution because they've been taught all their life in textbooks. They believe it because it's all they've been taught. The job depends on it, and they hope there's no God to answer to. Romans 1:28 says, "And even as I did not like to retain God in their knowledge, God gave them over to a reprobate mind, to do those things which they are not convenient." 2 Thessalonians 2:11 says, "And for this cause God sent them strong delusion so they should believe a lie." Romans 1:20 says, "For the invisible thing of him from the creation of the world are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made, even his internal power and Godhead, so there will be no excuse." So why do they believe in evolution? It's all they've been taught. Their job depends on it. They hope there's no God to answer to. They have social, political reasons, and they have too much pride to admit that they've been wrong. So here's an impact article. I'll talk about Einstein's golf. The evolutionists doesn't seem to see the problem with going from the abstract to the real world. The concrete world of hard, objective evidence and space-time relations, and the abstract world, there's a gulf in the middle, and you can't cross over that without evidence. See, if creation is true, there's a creator, there's rules, there's a purpose for life. But if evolution is true, there is no creator, there is no rules, and there is no purpose for life. If creation is true, man is a fallen creature and needs a savior. And man brought death into the world. There's an afterlife, and there's a comfort in knowing the future. But if evolution is true, man is evolving with no need of a savior, and death brought man into the world. There's no afterlife, then there's no hope for knowing the future. John 8:44 says, "When the devil speaketh a lie, he speaketh of his own, for he is a liar, and the father of it." Numbers 23:19 says, "God is not a man that he should lie." Titus 1:2 says, in hope of eternal life, which God, that cannot lie, promised before the world began. Romans 10:13 says, "For whosoever shall call upon the name of the Lord shall be saved." So let's summarize. God made the world. He owns it. And he makes the rules like the Ten Commandments. And we're all guilty of breaking his rules. You know, commandment number 9 says, "Thou shalt not bear false witness." That means you shouldn't lie. You shouldn't steal. So we're guilty of breaking his rules. And we will be punished. We must find a substitute to take our place. And Jesus is willing and able. If you die today, where would you go? And what on earth are you doing for heaven's sake? Are you serving the world or are you serving God? Well, everybody, I appreciate you guys watching my seminar. Make sure you subscribe and click the notification bell. That way you get updates whenever I post a new video. Also, like and comment to let YouTube know I'm getting interaction. And if you don't really have anything to say, just say good job, thank you, give me a question, anything you want. And I'll see you guys next time. Thank you so much.